Hey everybody, it's Sunday evening and we're going to take a trip around the world here. Very impromptu. I just kind of grabbed my camera, came in here and decided it's been enough activity here in the fish room this week that I should probably get people caught up a little bit before I get too far ahead of myself. Mostly been tinkering with lighting in a few different tanks, but I still want to get caught up on what's been going on in those tanks. So this is my 29 miscellaneous where we always start. Nothing really going on in here. I haven't done anything to it other than a simple water change and filter change this week. Didn't even bother to wipe down the glass or anything else, just ticking over like a clock. I did get in and trim the spent flower off of my Anubias plant, and then you can see the new leaf there that unfurled from the last video. That leaf was just starting to unfurl there, and you can see now it's fully out. So that's about all going on in my 29. Not really a lot to talk about. So we will move on to my disaster area of a gourami tank. This tank looks absolutely awful right now, and it is because of all of that blackbeard algae. I treated it with a 3-day blackout not too long ago, and the results I got were stunning. I couldn't believe how effective it was at knocking the algae back. And when I shot the video talking about it, I even expressed the opinion that I was probably jumping the gun and I was going to be here shooting a video in a week or two talking about how the stuff's come back with a vengeance. And here we are. It's come back with a vengeance. I mean, you can just see how thick and nasty that stuff is growing all over everything. So I just really have not been up for attempting to tackle this. I'm just not in the mood for it. I've been trying to do stuff that's been bringing me joy. And I guess maybe if I ever did get on top of this, that would bring me some joy. But I'm just not up for struggling with this right now. I'm really not. I don't even feel like looking at this tank most days. The water's clean enough. I've been staying on top of the water changes. Haven't changed the filter in a little while, but it's only been maybe a month since I changed the filter. So while it's due, it's not, you know, overdue and out of control. It just looks ugly. It's just nasty blackbeard algae growing all over everything in there, and I need to just dedicate some time and effort into really working on this tank, and as of late I have not been willing to do that. So this will be something we'll get working on here in the very near future. We're getting 8 more inches of snow today, and I heard something about some kind of blizzard or something coming next weekend, and I don't even want to think that far ahead. I just want to try to get through this one, and hopefully at some point the weather will break and I'll be able to get back outside, you know, doing stuff and feeling better. And when I'm feeling better, I'll probably be more likely to get down here and, you know, do some work on this tank or whatever. But right now I'm just struggling to get from one day to the next with these back-to-back snowstorms. Anyway, moving on. My T-bar tank, nothing really going on in here. I've been keeping an eye on this new heater that I installed. Everything seems to be working fine with it. My pleco that you can see his little nose sticking out right here. If you can see that little dark spot, that's its nose. It's getting pretty big. I was looking at it the other day. I shot a video where it actually let me touch it a little bit. But then it was actually laying down here on the glass. And if you've ever noticed this piece of wood right here, these markings are 1 inch apart. So if you ever want to get an idea of how big the fish is lying on the bottom there, you can just count the inches. And I did, and by about the base of the tail or so, we were at a little more than 7 inches already, or at least by my count. So that's getting to be pretty sizable for a 55-gallon tank, and it's not going to be too much longer, I guess, before we get in there and do something about that. But it does a great job at keeping everything clean. You can see how all the dark spots are basically where it can't scrape, and all of the stuff grows in there, and then all of the bright green spots are where it's keeping all of the surface area on the plants clean. So my Anubias actually stays nice and green and looking good. And you can see I've even got shoots of new growth coming up on the Anubias all over the place. As far as my T-bar, I was asked the other day about how the old hole in the head disease is coming, and it seems to come and go. Whatever it is, it comes and goes. I get little tiny spots will appear, and then a few days later they disappear, and so on and so forth. And it looks like right now it has one little dot on the side of its head, but by tomorrow that might not be there anymore. So I'm not so sure that's even hole in the head disease at all. I'm not really sure what's going on with that T-bar, but seems to be okay. I'm not going to worry too much about it. I also had a lesion on the side of my German blue angelfish here. It was on the gill flap just below the eye, and it was on the other side, and I wasn't sure what was going on with it. I was afraid that it was going to be some kind of illness or parasite or something, and it cleared up after a day or so, so I'm not really sure what that was. It might have been a simple minor injury from being hit by the other fish. Actually, now that I'm looking at my angelfish here, my green giant, I'm almost wondering if the scales on it have not been scraped off. It doesn't look quite right. I know the color patterning and the color marking is never solid, but some of those areas almost look like they've been scraped, so I'm definitely going to have to keep an eye on that. I lost some angelfish in the past due to my Chinese algae eaters scraping on their slime coat and chewing on their slime coat. And so now I've got that pleco in here. I've never seen a pleco do that to a fish before, but that just looks a little odd to me. That's another thing that I'm going to have to sort of start keeping my eye on. Probably just my imagination. Seldom do I come in here and really stare at my fish. It's only when I'm doing these videos that I really look at them this closely. And so I often notice stuff that's probably been there for a long time. I just didn't see it before. So moving on, we are going to look now at my Black Ghost knifefish tank. And this is one of the tanks that got a lot of work done to it. Finally finished treating for all of the cyanobacteria and just general grunge and growth that you get in a tank after a while. I got it all cleaned up and looking good. We've still got plenty of the maiden's hair algae growing in there, but I'm not too worried about the algae. It was all the other grunge and nastiness that I wanted to get out. I had sheets of that dark green cyanobacteria growing across the wood, and as you can see now, all of that's gone. You can actually see the woodwork again. You can see some green on it, but that's algae. That's not the same as what we had growing on there before. So what I did in this tank was I took the old fixtures off. In fact, the fixtures are still sitting right here next to the tank, and I can show you what one of those looked like. They were a Coralife, and they were the twin T5 units. They got the little bracket on the end so you can put them on the tank if it doesn't have a hood or whatever. Just a standard 36-inch aquarium light fitting. I had two of them on there, and they each take two high output 39-watt fluorescent tubes. So that was 156 watts on this tank, and I reduced it by putting some LEDs on here, and we're now down to 60 watts, which is still pretty high wattage, especially when you consider the efficiency of LEDs. But it's a softer light. They claim this is 4,000 Kelvin correlated color temperature. I do not believe that this is 4,000 Kelvin at all. This to me looks at least 3,000, possibly even 2,700 K. I've got a 3,500 Kelvin light that is not this soft. So I don't know. I'm not 100% whether I like this or not. It's a little too soft for my liking. I like a little bit more of a cool color. And the biggest issue I'm having and the biggest concern I'm having is my little dwarf neon rainbow fish here. You can only get color out of fish if you shine that color light on fish. And these fish have a lot of blue in them. You're not going to see blue light reflecting off of them if you're not shining blue light on them. And these very soft lights just don't have a lot of blue in them. And so my neon dwarf rainbows here have really gotten a lot duller. On the other hand, because this light is so soft, it's got a lot of reds and oranges in it. And that makes all of my other fish in this tank, which are all sort of reds and orange and earth tones, it makes them absolutely pop. My Rasporas look great. My little glow light tetras in there look fantastic. So all of the soft colors are really bringing out the reds and the oranges in there, but the lack of blue is really taking its toll on my little dwarf neons there. So I've got some options. I'm going to maybe blend two colors. I'm maybe going to put a 5,000 K tube on the front and then have the 3,000 K tube in the back. and then switch that around or something. I don't know. We'll talk about that later. I don't want to get too hung up on discussing the lighting in this tank because, again, it's going to be some more videos coming up in the future about how I switch the lighting around in that. Plus, we got 2 more tanks to talk about lighting before we're done this video. So let's move on to my native tank. Nothing really going on in here to talk about either. Just did a big water change the other day. I have not messed with the filter, but probably should. When the weather finally warms up, I'm probably going to get in here and thin the herd a little bit. I've got way too many big fish that really need to come out of here. If nothing else, I'm going to reduce the creek chubs by about half. I'll probably leave the golden shiners alone. But some of those creek chubs are just going to have to come out of here. And then I might do something else, like put a small sunfish in here or something. I've been thinking forever about just getting rid of this tank altogether and swapping it out for, well, you know, just changing the tank over, not actually getting rid physically of the tank, but changing this over to like a South American pike cichlid tank or a South American cichlid tank. You know, what I mean by that is if I do a pike cichlid tank, that'll be it. It'll be the pike cichlids will be the fish in the tank, and then I might have like a pleco on the bottom or something. When I say South American cichlid tank, that would be a tank that would have multiple fish swimming around in it. It'd be like a community tank of South American cichlids or something. I don't know. I'm just getting kind of tired of looking at this tank, same old day after day, and we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. But on the other hand, I've also grown very fond of some of these creek chubs, especially that big one right there that most of my viewers affectionately know as chubs. I almost want to just keep him at this point to see how big he'll get. They are schooling fish, but I don't think it's going to be too stressful for it if it only has 2 or 3 companions in the tank there. You know, not a lot of predators, not a lot of stress for it, so if it's only got a couple of little other creek chubs in there, I think it'll be fine. So, whatever. We'll figure out something as the weather changes and warms up if it ever does, so we'll see what happens with that. My snail tank, I actually do have a little something to talk about in my snail tank this week, and that is the shrimp that live in my snail tank, not the snails themselves. I finally got around to getting in there. I've been talking forever about having 2 shrimp that were in this tank, and they were eating the snail eggs, and that was helping to keep the snail population from exploding. Well, when I got in there to get them out, and I put them over into my waterfall tank, I noticed that there were several little baby shrimp swimming around in there, and a couple of other adults. So apparently, those shrimp have been in here breeding. And I've still got shrimp in this tank, despite having pulled what I thought were the 2 shrimp out of it. So, I don't know how many are in there, but there are still some shrimp in there. And about a week ago, the water started getting a little cloudy, and I'm not sure why. So, probably going to do a little bit of maintenance on this tank, although doing maintenance on it will probably disturb it more than anything. It'll probably make it even more cloudy or whatever. But that's just mulm. That's all like the waste from the snails and the shrimp and everything. That's basically poop. Just broken down and deteriorated into that, you know, it's called mulm in the tank. It's just that really, really, really fine, silty-like material. But that's all just broken down snail poop. So that gives you an idea how long it's been since I've done a water change on this tank. So, my purple spotted gudgeon tank, we can finally see into it. This is another tank that I swapped the lights out. I'm not going to go into a ton of discussion about it, but I will say briefly that I used the Great Value brand, that's the Walmart store brand, retrofit T8 LED. So you basically just pop out your old T8 fluorescent tube and you pop these in. You don't have to do anything to the ballast, you don't have to bypass it, or change it, or change your electric or anything. You just pop these tubes in, and they work. Except that the 2700K tubes that I looked at did not work. I was trying to do the color blending on this tank as well, because this gudgeon doesn't like a whole lot of light. And I could not get the 2700K tubes to work. So in the end, I finally gave up, and we have 2 of the 5000K. And I like it. I've gotten used to it, and I really prefer the cooler color temperature. I prefer that I say bright, but in my mind I'm spelling that B-R-I-T-E, not bright as in like luminosity or brightness. Some bulb brands will use their, some say daylight, some say bright white, some say cool white, some say soft white. It all just depends on what they're talking about. And bright white and cool white are often interchangeable. The bright white is usually there to indicate the more higher levels of blue or the higher color temperature. So when I say bright white, I'm generally talking about color temperature, not luminosity or brightness. So in those terms, I do prefer the brighter white light. I do like that bluish light that really allows you to see all the colors. It just gives you a higher color rendering. And overall, I think now that the gudgeon's gotten used to the higher levels of light in this tank, it doesn't seem to mind them at all. It either sits up in the corner here where it is kind of dark, it's where it sat most of the time anyway, or it just lays low and it'll just sit down here underneath some of the leaves or whatever, and it gets its little bit of shading from all the vegetation in the tank. So all in all, I'm really happy with the way this tank looks, but it does have 2 of the 5000K tubes on there, and the tank we were looking at a few minutes ago, while I was saying that had 60 watts of LED on it, this tank only has 20 watts of LED. So that's a lot of light for 20 watts. Not complaining about that at all. So really happy with the way this tank turned out. Not so happy with some of my other lighting projects, but again, we'll get to them in a few minutes. So my 125, we're going to have to stand back here. I got wires and stuff hanging down in the way. As I said, this is a very impromptu video. These wires are just overhead wires from lights that I've got hanging in front of my waterfall tank, so just ignore them for the moment. So the tank looks really dimly lit. It's not. It's just that it's got a lot of vegetation growing. The water sprite is getting pretty much out of control again. I mean, you can see the amount of roots. This is all just the roots from the one plant come all the way down here, so you can imagine how thick and dense all that is. That's just soaking up the light. That's an LED spotlight right there, and you can see that it's basically just lighting the surface of the leaves, and very little of that spotlight is actually making it to the bottom. It certainly doesn't look like a spot of light down there at all. So I'm going to have to get in here and do some maintenance on that. I don't doubt that the glass itself underneath of the light probably has green, thick algae and cyanobacteria growing on it, and that greatly reduces the amount of light. So this tank looks like it's very dimly lit right now, but it's not. I haven't changed the lighting or done anything on this tank. It's just all of this Maiden's Tresses algae, or this hair algae. So I'm not really sure what to do about that. I don't know if a blackout would work on this tank. I don't know. Maybe getting some Siamese algae eaters in here would be a good idea. I think maybe next time I make it down to my good fish store, the House of Tropicals, I might see how many Siamese algae eaters they have. Not Chinese algae eaters, the Siamese algae eaters, which I have in my T-bar tank and I absolutely love. Excuse me. Went down the wrong pipe there. I absolutely love my Siamese algae eaters. They're really fascinating fish. They're really beautiful fish, and they do a fantastic job at eating this kind of algae. So I think if I got some Siamese algae eaters in here, we would see a lot cleaner tank. And honestly, if it wasn't for all that grunge on the front glass, I wouldn't mind so much. I don't really care too much about the algae that's growing on the vegetation back there, as long as it's not that filthy, horrible, disgusting looking blackbeard algae, which again, it's just algae. It's not, I say it's disgusting and filthy and dirty. It's not, it's just algae, but it just looks that way. It just looks like you got crud growing all over everything, and it's just that weird algae. So this tank has a different kind of algae in it, and I don't mind this one nearly as much, but still need to get in there and do a little bit of maintenance and get cleaning up on that. So moving on to my 20-gallon Angelfish tank. If you haven't already figured it out, this is another tank that I'm not happy with the lighting that I've changed over. Way too soft for my liking. It's one of my blue mystery snails. I've got 2 of them in here. Still waiting for them to breed, but they never have. Don't even see the other one at the moment. So this angelfish would probably look a lot better if it swam under the light, but it would also look better if it had some bluer light. You know, again, that bright or cool white would be more appealing. I think the plants will be okay. The only plant I have growing in this tank is Java Fern, and Java Fern's a very low light plant, so I think that softer white will probably be okay, but I just don't like the way it looks. It looks, you know, it would be fine for a little while. It's fine at the end of the day if you're trying to, you know, dial your brain down. You want to get a, you know, some of those softer colors in there. That really does, believe it or not, that really does affect your brain. When you see less blue light and more red light, that's, you know, your brain is being told the sun's going down and it's later in the evening. It helps you get a little better night's sleep at night. So I don't mind looking at these kind of lights at 10 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night, but, you know, when I come in here at lunchtime, I don't want to look like the sun's still just coming up. And that's the way this really, really soft light looks. So what this actually is if you remember me talking about the 2700K tubes that I was trying to put on my gudgeon tank, they caused me some problems. And one of the problems they caused me was that they burned up the ballast in some of the aquarium fixtures and the hoods that I put them in. And I tried some 18-inch hoods as well, and one of those ballasts got burned out. So for $15, I replaced one of the ballasts in one of the other fixtures, but I was still left with an 18-inch fixture with the bad ballast in it. So I figured either for $15 I could buy a new ballast, or for $15 I could buy this. And what this is a little LED under cabinet light that I didn't even cut the cord to. I actually just wired it directly to the original existing cord. Those are the wires that came in to the original hardware. You know, it had the plastic mounting in there for the fluorescent tube. I took all of that stuff out, and then instead of cutting the hood to allow that plug to go through or having to cut the wire on this brand new fixture, I just wired the original existing plug directly to that one, turned it on, and now it's just in there, and it works fine. I'm happy with the way it works. I just wish that when the packaging said that it was a bright white light, they meant it, because this is not a bright white light. This is a very soft white light. And after I got it and plugged it in, I realized that that is not a bright white light. So unfortunately, there's no, you know, color temperature police out there that go around and tell these companies you have to label it this way or you have to label it that way. So if they want to call that bright white, they can. I just think it's kind of just, you know, deceptive to the consumer that they're going to get a bright white light and then they're going to see that. And it does say, if you look closely on the packaging, it does actually say that the color temperature is 3000 K. So if I had found that, which I always recommend to people, I always say don't go by what they tell you. Don't go by the daylight or the cool white or the bright white. Go by the number. Go by the color temperature. And this is exactly why. This was called bright white, yet it's 3000 K. And it was clearly marked 3000 K on the label. I just didn't look closely enough to see the number. I went by their bright white designation, and now, you know, I've got the original hood. It's sitting right here, and it's got the fluorescent tube in it. All I got to do is put it back on, and it's back to the way it looked, you know, an hour ago, which is probably what's going to happen. But my goal is to get every tank in this room eventually over to LEDs, and right now I just don't have an 18-inch 5000K retrofit to go in here. And as soon as I do, I'm going to put it in this fixture, and we'll put it back on, and we'll have that nice bright 5000K again, and we'll be able to see what's going on in the tank instead of that perpetual sunset that we've got going on right now. So my quarantine tank, same deal. Nothing really going on in here. I've got the same fluorescent tube, same fixture and everything, and at some point whenever I can get an 18-inch retrofit LED tube, I'll go ahead and replace that, and then that'll be just about the last tank in the room that we get LEDs put on, and my quest for LEDs will be almost complete. So last for this video, but certainly not least, is Butterbean's tank. This is my Brackish tank. Excuse me. Looks like he's in there pecking around looking for any little bits of snails he might have missed from last night's dinner. He might also be picking up the shells. They will sort of self-regulate their teeth in the same way that you can put something for rodents to chew on, or the way you put a cuttlebone for birds to chew on, and it keeps their beak from growing too much. The puffers actually need hard shells and stuff in their diet to keep their teeth from outgrowing. And they will often just do this. They'll go around and pick up little bits of shell. I see him from time to time down here just picking up bits of old snail shell and just chewing it up and crushing it up and spitting it back out. He will also do what he's doing now. I actually just saw him pick up a piece of aquarium gravel off the bottom, and you will see him sort of chewing on the gravel a little bit and spitting it out. So I have heard stories about people that have to cut their puffer's teeth with a little pair of nail snips or something like that. I have never had that issue. His teeth have never been a problem for me, and you can probably tell why just by this kind of behavior. And that's exactly what he's doing right now. He's in there, he's just picking up little rocks and chewing on them a little bit and spitting them back out, or he might even be picking up bits of shell from time to time and chewing those up too. So not too worried about Butterbean and the condition of his teeth. I was wondering if that molly was ever going to move. It looked like it was sleeping, sitting there on that rock. I don't know if you noticed it or not, but the other one is down there on the bottom. Those are my orange sailfin mollies. And this tank is probably about due for a water change. You can see I'm getting a little bit of that green, that reddish cyanobacteria film is sort of starting to grow over the surface of things again. I'm getting a little bit of patches growing on the bottom in there, and then of course the glass looks like it could use a little wiping down. And that's about all for this tank. There's not really a lot going on in here, just it's in need of a water change, and that's about it. So that's about all I can think of for what's been going on in the fish room this week. I've obviously got the waterfall tank behind me. We'll go ahead and end the video, I guess, by having a look at the waterfall tank, but I'm not really going to talk too much about it because I just shot a video yesterday or the day before. I'll go ahead and attach a card where I did an update on this tank and what I've been working on in here and everything. So if you want to watch that video, that's another 20-minute video in its own right. So again, I'll attach a card to that, and you'll get to enjoy my waterfall tank. So thanks for watching this one. Make sure you're subscribed. You never know what you're going to get with me. I will also mention very briefly, I kind of forgot about my red-clawed crab tank down here. It's just not a lot to talk about. I never see the crabs. I've got some Endler's guppies swimming around in there. They look awesome. But now that I've put floating vegetation in there, I've taken some of the water sprite out of this tank and thrown it in there. And as a result, we barely even can see the guppies swimming around in there anymore because they just swim around underneath of all the vegetation. And so this tank almost seems like a little bit of a footstool for this tank where it doesn't really serve a purpose anymore. So we'll see what happens in the future. But for now, we're going to call that the end of this video. And again, I'm going to say thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed. And I will leave you here with one final look at my waterfall tank.